Welcome to FitBody Lifestyle, the show where we dive deep into the world of fitness, health, business, relationships, and the art of living a balanced life. I'm Jami.
And I'm Greg, and we're here to give you the benefit of our experiences in the fitness and bodybuilding industry, the corporate world, running a business, personal development, and building healthy relationships.
Whether you're sweating it out in the gym, hustling in your business, or seeking balance in your everyday life, you're in the right place.
So lace up those sneakers and grab that water bottle, and let's get ready to transform our minds, our bodies, and our lives. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of FitBody Lifestyle, and I am here with the most important person in my life, Miss Jami D, and AKA Mama Bear. Hi, baby.
Hey, lover.
So today we're going to talk about a topic that comes up very frequently, and by very frequently, I think, and as we're getting into the show season now, this is very relevant for us and a recurring topic, which is PostShow Blues. And let's start kind of with defining that. How would you define that?
Post-show blues, I would define as the time after you've competed, where the buildup, the momentum coming into the show, it comes to an abrupt stop. You're shifting from, the excitement and the intensity of a prep and of a peak week and of a stage presentation to now needing to go into a different type of mode of an improvement season, building, things like that. And we're talking, it's different if you're doing back-to-back shows, but we're talking about, you completed your season, you're going into an improvement season, and it's a very hard mental shift. And it can a lot of times cause people to feel a little sad, a little lost, confused,
all of the above,
needing direction, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's tough because for some competitors, in particular competitors who have spent a long improvement season, some competitors will spend a year or more in that improvement season. And I mean, it's not uncommon for this scenario to play out. Competitor competes in year one, and they get feedback, and a lot of the feedback is you need to grow, you need to improve this and that, whatever it is. And so that competitor makes a good choice in taking a long improvement season. So for some people that's several months, for other people that's a year, for still other people it may be more than a year. And so you've taken off that time from the stage. And then you get into your prep, which is depending on, where you are, 12 to 18 to 24 week prep, depending on where you are. So you've been prepping for now a year or more to get on the stage for what amounts to the time that you're actually on stage is maybe 20 minutes max, maybe. If you're in the pro leagues, maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes on stage, maybe. And then you're done. You're done. What the hell happens next?
Right. And so number one in managing this really is having a plan. And I know that when I started competing originally, this wasn't as big of a topic. And I think, not as many people were talking about it. We certainly were experiencing it.
Absolutely, yeah.
We just didn't have any tools to really help manage it. And part of helping manage it is being able to have the conversation around it and talk to people and get that support that you need. But not having a plan is, I feel like, the thing that can be the most impactful.
And can I interrupt for just a second? Mm-hmm. The reason that we didn't have any tools is because the focus was so much on the show. It was 99.9% focused on the show, and then, hey, whatever. And part of that there's also, recognize the other part of the mindset that goes into this is that your 12 to 20 week prep is spent in deficit, where you are depriving yourself of things that you may want. And everybody knows that we are big advocates for the macro-based approach, and part of that is because it builds in some flexibility, and you can build in some flexibility during your prep for sure. But by and large, that time during prep is a time of restriction, and that show becomes that pinnacle up on that hill of what you want to achieve. and you spend that 12, 16, 20 weeks or longer in this deprivation mode or scarcity mode where you are constantly focused on what am I going to do after, and we hear this all the time, right? And honestly, it perks up our ears even more now than it ever did of the people who are so post-show focused on what am I going to do after the show? What am I going to eat? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? How am I going to treat myself to all these things? Which all is fine, provided you have a plan.
Right. Well, and what you're describing in my mind is not a plan. It's a plan. It's a plan to go buck nutty.
Right.
And do all the things and have all the things that you don't want to have, which then, of course, we've seen people put 20, 40 pounds on in a matter of months.
Yeah.
And then, of
Weeks.
course, they're miserable and upset with themselves. And so the plan needs to build in enough flexibility and yet enough structure so that, you're able to manage the extreme cravings that are going to come your way. That sense of kind of like needing a little bit of grounding, a little bit of solid ground to stand on, so having a plan as to how you're going to build in that flexibility with enough structure and having very specific goals and objectives in place for that improvement season. So, because what's kept you going for that long during the prep is the goal of going on stage. And so now all of a sudden that goal has been completed. And now you need to have built in kind of that next level of objectives and things that you're excited about so that it helps to keep that momentum and that energy going.
And I, as you were talking about that, I think about one of our more successful athletes in her improvement season right now. And one of the things that she was adamant about is her focus was so much on executing her post-show plan. It was as detailed, as disciplined, as passionate, as enthusiastic as it was about executing her prep going into the show. It was that same level of dedication that she had. And honestly, I mean, she has exceeded all expectations, this particular athlete I'm talking about. If you're out there, hopefully you know we're talking about you. But
I've had a couple of our athletes message me after listening to our podcast, but I know you were talking about
And I am so proud of this person for being able to get their macros just so much higher on no cardio and to be able to continue to make those gains during their improvement season. And it hasn't been without challenge, but the point is that she had a plan and we had a plan and she executed on that plan. And with the balance of flexibility and structure.
Mm-hmm. Two of the things that will really help and I think are important to consider is that when you're going through a prep, you need to make sure you're building in enough flexibility and breaks, whether that be deload weeks or refeed weeks or diet breaks or whatever you need to not get yourself to the point where you're so burned out by the time you're post show that you kind of have run out of steam. So I think that's really important. And then also like in that plan for your post show, building in enough flexibility to where it's not going to be so easy to fall off track to where then you start beating yourself up and start that vicious cycle of, oh my gosh, I messed up. So now I might as well just throw all caution to the wind. And then you mess up again and then you beat yourself up. It's just kind of that vicious cycle. So what we want to do is build in enough flexibility, that there's not that need to do that.
And we see those needs for flexibility coming. In particular, the more that you have set yourself up, and I don't mean this in a negative connotation at all, but the more that you have deprived yourself in prep, the more you are at risk for the things that happen after the show. And we see a lot of that with social eating, with family events. None of this stuff exists on an island. This is not a singular topic of post-show blues. It ties in with other aspects, other attributes and elements, dimensions of success in this sport, in this industry, which is, it starts with building your tribe. Who are you going to put around you that understands, supports, empowers you to live this lifestyle that you want? Not whether they live it themselves or not. Do they embrace your living of that? And are you surrounding yourself with those people? Because if you're not, after the show, that provides yet another influence on you that can drive you off outside of your boundaries.
A lot of us have learned the hard way with this.
Yeah.
And I can speak from experience, for sure. And one of the worst, I would say the worst post-show experience I had a vacation planned literally right after the show was done. So the show was done and I got on a plane and I went to Mexico and I was there with family, and, there was a lot of things planned around food and drink and things like that. And I'll never forget, because my ankles turned into cankles and I was miserable. It was just a terrible experience. And so when people tell me they have a vacation planned right after a show, I always kind of cringe a little bit. And I'm like, oh. And some people handle it better than others. I mean, it can be done if you've got a really good plan in place. And I do think it's easier to be in an environment, at least for, let's say 4 to 8 weeks after your show, the environment is more conducive to helping you stay on track and not adding more temptation or stress than needed, so that way you're able to really execute. Because once you get to that point, it starts to become a little bit easier. It's really that window right after the show that can tend to be the worst. But what happens is if you jump right in and go overboard, then by the 8-week out mark, you're so upset with yourself that the blues continue and can maybe get worse.
Yeah.
So if you can protect that time post-show, and really take it as seriously as you took your prep, to help you get on stable ground and kind of get your rhythm with your improvement season, I find most people are a lot more successful. And
we give you that 8-week mark. I mean, there's a little bit of arbitrariness in that for sure, because it's going to depend on everybody and every situation. Yeah. But what we see just based on the high and the low, and if you want to, just do the little, rhythm graph or the XY axis, is that your cravings are just going to peak. And if you are one of those people, and this ties in with other topics that we've covered, is that if you are tying food to fun, that's a problem. Or a potential problem, I should say. When food becomes your outlet after the show, you're at risk for really going outside of the rails or going off the rails, I should say, on undoing a lot of what you work so hard to do.
Well, and part of the reason is the hormonal balance,
That's
which
right.
I want to dive into here.
Yeah, let's get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel like had I understood it a little bit better when I first started competing, I think it would have made my life so much easier. It was something I learned by doing a lot of research and, understanding endocrinology a bit better, things like that. So, when you're done competing and you're at a level of body fat that's very low, you're not going to be able to eat intuitively. Like, you cannot trust your hunger signals. Leptin, which is the hormone that tells our brain that we are done eating, we're satiated, we had enough, it's nil. I mean, leptin is produced in fat cells, and we have very little fat at the time we finish our show. So there's not that sensation. And anybody who's competed before can tell you about the sensation of eating a meal and being hungrier than before you ate the meal. And that's a really hard thing to combat, because it's confusing. You're feeling like I need to eat more, when in reality you're physically full. And then ghrelin, which is the hormone that tells your brain it's time to eat, is on overdrive, because your body, we're not meant to be that lean. We're not meant to be stage lean. We don't look like that year round. So our bodies always want homeostasis. And this is a function that's helped us stay alive, through generations and generations.
It's a survival mechanism.
Absolutely.
Right, yeah.
There's a drive to eat so that we can survive and, do what we need to do for that. So, it kind of, we turn a little bit to that fight or flight sort of mode that, our bodies think we're starving. Our bodies don't understand we did this on purpose for a bodybuilding competition. Our bodies just think we're starving.
Your body doesn't get the memo.
Right. And so the hormones it's going to take a little time. And that's why I give that window. And even like you said, after 8 weeks, you still may not be completely back. It's just, that's to me, usually the most sensitive time, just because our signals are so out of whack, and for a good reason. That means our bodies are doing what
that
they're
means
supposed
your
to
body is doing what it's supposed to do, and it is protecting itself. And so this is all normal, as we talk about normal, given the circumstances. And normalcy is always a product of what is the situation and what is the norm. But the norm is that your body is always seeking homeostasis, even when you're prepping, whether post-show, pre-show, your body is always doing that. That's just its function to do. So how do we chart out then? How do you? I would say this. So what's the first thing to do? You talked about having a plan. Okay. What's the next thing after that?
Executing the plan.
Fair enough.
Is that a trick question?
No.
The next thing is following the plan and understanding there's no such thing as perfect. You're going to make mistakes. If you do go off plan or something happens, hopefully you've built in enough flexibility to where you don't beat yourself up for it.
Yeah.
And sometimes there comes a point where you kind of got to give yourself a little reality check. Maybe you're going off too much and you're not keeping things in place. I do think, having a coach that's holding you accountable is important. And I know a lot of coaches like to just focus on prep, and maybe they're not as well versed or just aren't interested in helping people through their improvement season. So that's something to think about. And if you have a coach that isn't, then maybe finding somebody to work with you in your improvement season to help provide you with the accountability. Maybe having a friend or a family member that's also a competitor, or at least understands what you're doing and can be your support system. I do think, like you talked about, building that community of supporters around you to help you, because everyone's experience a little bit different, and at the same time they're similar. So if you go out to people that you know and you trust and you say, hey, I'm really struggling, what have you done in one of these kinds of situations, or I'm just feeling really down, that kind
it's the phone a friend option. You got to have the friend to phone, and whether it's a coach or somebody, a trusted advisor, whatever the case is, you've got to have that outlet, because you are going to go through these because there's an emotional component of this, there's a psychological component of this, there's a physical component of this. They're all related.
Physiological,
right?
Yeah.
It's all part of the part and parcel. And so as we talk about have a plan, execute the plan, the thing that I was thinking of that kind of predicates or that overlays all of this is mindset, and how to then set that mindset of what do you want to achieve. And part of that is setting reasonable expectations, setting appropriate objectives, and wrapping your head around the fact that and I said this already, but I'm going to go back to it, which is when you are attacking maybe is not the right word, when you are leaning into your post-show process and plan and execution of that plan with the same discipline, enthusiasm, and passion that you did your prep, you're going to set yourself up for success. No one day in prep or post-show is going to make or break you. And I would say no single week either. And what we were having this conversation yesterday, to add 1 pound of fat, you have to be in surplus of 3,500 calories. So if on day one you overindulge, well, you probably didn't overindulge by 3,500 calories, but
hopefully not.
Hopefully not. But you may have overindulged in salty foods, and salt will drive that weight up. And so you wake up the next day and it's a 2-3 pound gain. Well, understand the context of that, understand the mindset of that. And we've previously talked, but I think we need to go back to that again, is that F it mentality. Oh, well, I'm off my plan, F it. How do you do that?
It's really tough. I find that the people that do the best are the people that look at this as a lifestyle where the competition is kind of the cherry on top. So, I feel like the people that get into the most trouble with that are the ones that are reliant on the show for motivation. They're 100% reliant on that, and we've seen those people that, they'll go to the effort mode, gain a bunch of weight, and then, okay, I need to do another show so that I can lose the weight.
Right. I must have a goal in order to motivate myself.
Yeah. And, they're like, okay, I know I haven't made the improvements yet because I haven't taken enough time, or maybe they didn't even train during their effort mode, but they needed to put on muscle, but they don't care. They just want to go back into prep because they want to lose the weight because they're uncomfortable. And that is a recipe for disaster. Every time you do that, the next post show is going to be harder and worse and more difficult to come back out of. So, that's where really just being honest with yourself and taking a good look and forgiving yourself, giving yourself some grace for going into that effort mode for whatever time it was, and then just starting to take the steps then to get yourself back to a good place of consistency, and of being reasonable again. I think there are people that are on the other end of the spectrum where they have an unrealistic view of how lean they need to stay in their improvement season, and that's another issue that can drive people to do the effort.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the mind paradox that competing presents, because you have prepped for however many weeks, you are getting on stage, what is celebrated, what is championed, what is recognized, what is awarded and rewarded is that package that you put on stage. And psychologically, that puts that expectation of, well, then that's what I need. This is straight Pavlov stuff. This is positive reinforcement. You're getting positive reinforcement for being on stage. And then you get off stage, and if your mindset is such that, well, what was on stage is my expectation of how I need to look every day, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. And you cannot make improvements and gain muscle staying in a deficit year round. We do have those people that want to do that. So it's a constant battle of, we've got to feed you to make the improvement. So you kind of have people at two different ends of the spectrum. There's those people that post-show, kind of just, like we say, stick their heads in the refrigerator and don't pull them back out, which of course isn't good for the hormone balance or, the body image, those kinds of things. So it's finding the balance there. And then we have people at the other end of the spectrum, which is what we're talking about now, that feel like if they're not stage lean, then, they've tied so much of their self-worth and their value to that and that look. I do think that things have changed a bit in terms of, people being celebrated for embracing an improvement season, embracing their off-season curves, things like that, which is great. And yet it is a challenge. And especially if you've had a long competition season, if you've gotten used to seeing yourself a certain way. I literally just had a conversation with someone the other day, and she was just in tears because some of her clothes weren't fitting anymore. She looks incredible. She's in an improvement season. She's gained the appropriate amount of weight. It's by far not too much. And she's wanting to fit into clothes that were prep clothes. And I had to just have that talk with her that, hey, maybe it's time to go get yourself a couple cute outfits that you feel beautiful in that fit you right now, because you look amazing. It's, you've done things the right way. So, that's where, each individual is different, and figuring out how to manage the emotions and the mindset around it, really requires being compassionate, surrounding yourself with people that are compassionate and are going to call you on it if you're also being a little, silly or ridiculous or whatever that situation is. But I think more than not, people are just beating themselves up so much that it's starting a vicious cycle of, they're mad at themselves, they punish themselves, and they're mad at themselves. And, it's just kind of that vicious cycle that needs to be broken.
Well, and you going backwards a little bit, you said that the most successful people that you've seen are the people who embrace this as a lifestyle, which I agree with 100%. And I guess I would add an element to that, which is in my mind, the most successful people I have seen are the people who are willing to ask for help when they need it, and the people who are vulnerable and recognize that I am not right now. I can't do this on my own, and I need to get help. And I think that ties in with the comment that you just made, is that we've gotten more into the celebration of that improvement season aspect, which I 100% agree with. And I would also say that it's still not you're still not getting a trophy for it. You're not on stage under the lights. You're not in that package that you work so hard to get. So while yes, it is improving, it is still you're comparing. It's almost comparing apples and oranges in the sense that it's just a different level of recognition and reward that is being set up for stage versus your improvement season.
And a lot of what I do for clients during an improvement season is that reassurance.
Yeah.
We're where we need to be right now. I do think having somebody that you trust, that has an eye and understands, what you're doing, to reassure you that what you're doing is correct. You're right where you should be right now. I think a lot of times can take a little bit of the worry and sting out of it, because we are our own worst critics. We do not see ourselves most of the time in a true light. And I mean, I'll speak personally. I can't tell you how many times, even when I was competing, I would do a photo shoot and I would look at the photos and I hated every one of them. I remember one photo shoot in particular. I think it was a little bit post-show and I didn't like how I was looking. And, I just hated everything about everything. And of course, about a year later, and I never posted the pictures or used them or anything. About a year later, I go back and I looked at them and I'm like, these are great. What was I, I just couldn't see myself, for where I was and how I actually looked. So I do think, a lot of times, we need those people that we trust that are going to also be honest with us, because we're not going to trust a person who's just going to blow smoke up our butts either. But somebody that we know that we can trust to make sure that, we're doing the right things and we're in the right place.
And there's a difference in that trust factor about delivering feedback with compassion and delivering feedback that's just hurtful. It may be true, but and it goes with that question that we always talk about. The most important coaching question is, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? You may be right in telling somebody that they are out of control, but that may not be effective for that person. Depending on that person, some people it may be effective. But knowing how to, and I think, as coaches, we really celebrate the fact when we have an athlete who does say, look, I'm in a bad way right now. I need help. And when we are able to step in and be that voice of reason or that second set of eyes and that reality check, I mean, that's a level of trust that we don't take lightly. And we aren't there just to reassure you. We are also there to give you, hey, look, if something's off, we'll tell you that it's off. But we're not going to tell you you suck or you're a bad person or anything, because you're not. You're human. Everybody's going through their own things. So it's that it's kind of that balance, I guess, is just finding what's the right space between being honest and direct, but also being kind and compassionate. And they're not exclusive. Those things are not exclusive.
It's true. And there's going to be some variance in what that person needs at the time. The one thing I do caution, though, is that the worst thing to do when you're struggling is, with consistency or with mood or with, appetite control or any of the things that we're talking about that can come, is to jump into another prep.
Right.
It's really the signal that it's time to pump the brakes and, focus on some things, and make sure that you're back on stable ground. I had a client that, came to me already really struggling post-show and was having a hard time with appetite. There was some hormonal imbalances. There was some, appetite issues. All of these things were going on. And we started to reverse. We started to really work on mindset. We started working on some of the things that she was struggling with. And I remember she finally got to this place and she messaged me with her check-in and she says, you know what? I feel better. I'm ready. My head's in a good place. And I mean, she had just gotten there. And my response to her is, you have one toe in the water now. I need you fully submerged, because yes, you're feeling good. And yes, we've gotten to a good place. And yet it's still fragile. It's still new. You just got here. So if we go ahead and jump right back into the fire, we're going to then go backwards and we're not going to be able to sustain it. So, if we're going to do another prep, we're going to go into another on season, we need to make sure that we are fully in a good, stable place, mentally, emotionally, hormonally, health-wise, like all these things need to be aligned. Then is the time to start thinking about, okay, I want to go ahead and choose a show and start working towards that.
Yeah, we've talked about that story to illustrate that, which is if you're building a house, you don't start your house with your roof. You don't start your house building a wall, and you certainly don't start your house by putting the furniture inside. You start your house with the foundation. And being in that foundation, and that foundation oriented mindset means that you are focused on the basics and not just dipping a toe in the water, but actually jumping in. And jumping in does not mean, hey, once you jump in, well, jumping in is a moment. Anybody can jump in the pool. You've still got to be able to sustain that plan. And sustainment is the hard part. Anybody can do anything for a day or a week even. You've got to be able to show that consistent progress and that consistent dedication. It does not mean that there won't be lapses or ups and downs during that time period, but there should still be a consistent, when you back away from it, it shouldn't be like up and down. When you back away from it, it should be a consistent progression upwards.
Yeah. I mean, and you'll know when you're back in that place, when you're having fun doing your workouts again, when you're enjoying tracking your food, when you're excited about, the daily completions of the tasks, like where it starts to become fun again. And, you're excited.
Right.
You're excited to do all the things you get to do. Kind of what comes along with those post-show blues is that sense of dread sometimes. Oh, I don't want to track my food today. Maybe I don't want to go to the gym. Like I'm just feeling kind of, like the wind has been taken out of my sails a little bit. That's how I would explain that post-show feeling. And that can go, it depends on the person. It also depends on how long they were dieting and how hard they were dieting for. I do have some people that bounce back really quickly, and I have other people that need more time. And there is no right or wrong. It's really an individual thing. And I think what's important is to respect and be kind to ourselves and where we are. This stage is not going anywhere. It's going to be there when you're ready. We have lots of shows, and the most important thing is that you're taking care of your health. You're making sure to prioritize the other things in your life that you love, and the people, the jobs, whatever it is that's going on. And so it makes me really excited when, I have athletes that I've been working with for years and years, and they've gotten to a place where they really understand this, and they will, we've done a few or many improvement seasons together, and they know how to do that. So they'll go and do that, and then they'll come back, and I know when they come back to me, they're in a good spot mentally, physically, they're coming back ready to go. And it's really cool to see that because, to me, at the end of the day, if I've done my job well, then somebody should be able to go and take that and do it for themselves. Right. You know what I mean? So those people, and it's not going to usually be the first time. It's going to take a little bit of time, and having that guidance and that accountability, till you really can trust yourself to do it for yourself. And some people still like to always have the accountability, and other people get to that place. So I find that it's a rare person that does this right the first time. Most of the time, even with help and accountability, there's going to be more bumps and bruises the first time, and then the second time gets a little bit better, and so on. And then as people mature in the sport and in their ability to moderate themselves, then, eventually they get to know what works best for them.
And I do think that's some grace that we need to spend, just at least recognize and foot stomp a little bit, which is that you're not going to master this the first time. Because everything that we talk about in terms of these, lessons learned and learnings that we've acquired, they're for us, they're ours, and that's what we experience. But every person's experience is going to be unique to you, and so part of that is going in with a growth mindset, which is, what can I learn from this experience? Not how do I be perfect, not how do I win, it's how do I grow and be better? How do I get better in this process? And when you can embrace that growth mindset of recognizing that, look, I'm going to set myself up for success, I'm going to do everything I can do to be better every day, and when something happens, I'm going to learn from it, I'm going to apply that lesson forward, and through that process, I will continually improve. Just like bodybuilding. Bodybuilding's a process of continuous improvement. The other thought that I wanted to kind of chat about is we talked a little bit about the comparisons between pre and post show are very, very evident to me, in terms of mindset, in terms of approach, in terms of discipline, enthusiasm, passion, all those things that go into a good prep. And part of what we've talked about, or I think we've talked about it, whether we have or not, we can talk about it now, is controlling your circle, and recognizing that, look, if you have that friend in your life who is a, you know what, I really don't understand your lifestyle. What? Come on, you can have that donut. You can do this, you can do that. It's almost like that little devil on your shoulder that's just saying it's full of temptation. Well, I gotta say, if you want to live this lifestyle and you have a person in your life who is not understanding of that, I think you need to make a choice about what's more important to you, that friendship or your lifestyle. Because if that friendship is not supporting and embracing your lifestyle and your desires, maybe that's not the right friend. And I don't know if that sounds extreme or not, but I don't think it does, because I don't think it just applies to prep. I think it applies to a lot of other things, that we have influences in our life that are not necessarily positive influences.
Well, we talked a lot about this in the episode about your friendship garden.
Right.
I loved that. Was actually one of my favorite episodes. And I will say there were people when I first started competing that weren't very supportive, both friends and family. Not because they didn't care about me, just mostly because they didn't understand. And in some cases, they actually were worried because I started looking different than they were used to seeing me look, and that kind of freaked them out a little bit. And so I did have some of those people, throwing some roadblocks in my way or sabotaging me at times. And, what I did find in those situations is, for the most part, if I communicated it in the right way with them, it might take a few times. They might not get it the first time. But if I communicated it in the right way and helped them understand this is something I'm doing that's important to me, and, I need your support for it. Of course, there are those people that still don't respect that. And if after explaining it several times, then I agree. Then at that point, you have to make a choice. I definitely feel like, giving people a chance, especially when they don't understand, is a good idea. And at the same time, figuring out like, who are those people that really resonate with your values in your life is something that's important no matter whether you compete or not.
I think it just comes down to that setting of boundaries and also informing people of what those boundaries are. The other thought that I had in this same vein was social media and other influences that are on you. And, we've talked a little bit about going into a show and people watching food porn and while that may, I don't know. Me personally, I think that's a negative influence, because I think you're focusing on something that you can't have or think you can't have, and that produces the want or that scarcity mindset after you have the clearance to actually eat that stuff, and it may result in an overindulgence. For social media after the show, I see this all the time. I think there's a difference between being a fan of a sport and stalking the sport. When you are watching other people get on stage, if you're in your improvement season and you are dedicated to that, when you are consistently focusing on other people's prep, on other people's shows, on how other people are looking, you are setting yourself up for failure in that respect. And if those influences cannot be controlled by you, meaning that you are responding negatively to those, it might be time to just quiet those sources for a while until you get on the right mindset. I don't know how I feel about that.
I think it depends on the person and on their mindset. I mean, the advice I would give, and I do give, is that if something that you're watching or that you're reading or that you're doing is making you feel anxious or making you feel less than or making you feel guilty, then I would mute it. And maybe down the road that same thing might become inspiring to you. It might just be where you are in your journey that particular input, whether it be something about food or whether it be something about someone's prep or what they look like, or just whatever messaging is being put out by that person. I know there's different schools of thought when it comes to improvement seasons, where some people are all about, eat what you want, do what you want. And then there's other people that are restrict. I mean, whatever triggers you, I would say mute it. And I do that myself. Like if it's a feeling I get, if I start seeing somebody's post or something and it gives me kind of that uneasy feeling or that anxious feeling, I'm like, this isn't helping to fuel what I want to experience in my life right now. I'm just going to put that on the back burner and mute it for now. If down the road I'm interested in it again, I can go and unmute it and listen to it again. I just, I know there's some people that just really love like watching cooking shows or whatever, and it's fun for them, and it doesn't really negatively affect them at all. And then there's other people that it starts making them obsess about food and things like that when they're having a hard time controlling their appetite. So I think it's a very individual thing, and figuring out, what those triggers are for you individually is really important. We're in this world where we're constantly being fed from so many different sources. So, figuring out like what are those sources that are going to feed the aspects of myself that I want to have fed.
And like all things, there's a balance between, hey, look, if you're doing an improvement season, you're probably doing an improvement season with the goal or the long-term objective of getting back on stage. So I completely understand that. I completely understand the desire to follow or watch bodybuilding shows or bikini shows and follow the results and look at the judges' criteria. And I, in fact, encourage that to become more educated in the sport, more experienced in the sport. And if that is producing a longing to be on stage that cuts your improvement season short or sends you off into some of those disruptive mindsets that you just talked about, guilt, shame, anxiety, those negative emotions that are not producing the outcome that you want, then maybe it's time to mute those for a period of time.
Yes. One of the things I feel like has helped me and some of the athletes I've worked with when you get into this post-show blues sort of period is, coming to seminars, going to shows, supporting others. And like you said, if it's something that's then driving you to want to just compete again when you need to take a step back, well, then maybe that's not for you. And at the same time, I think, especially if you can get some in-person, just to fuel that, like that sense of belonging and the camaraderie, because that's an aspect of our community that I think is really special. And so I think sometimes when people feel far removed from that, then it can start to feel a little bit lonely. So I do think finding ways to get involved. I mean, you can volunteer at some of the shows to help out with, expediting or help out with other things, or just like I said, go to seminars in your local area or travel to seminars, and meet new friends. We do, like within our team, we have a lot of different ways to help people socialize, WhatsApp groups and Facebook private groups and things like that, just to kind of help people like have an opportunity to connect and share and things like that. And I see a lot of times people go, let's go, to this show together, or let's go to the seminar together. And I do think that during a post-show period, like maybe even having some of those things pre-planned, just so that you have other things to focus on and look towards, can be helpful. I also think I had talked about a little other goals and objectives. It could be anything from, a photo shoot or, a special event that you're going to, a reunion, a wedding, something that you're looking forward to looking, nice in your dress or whatever. And at the same time, it's not a show goal where you're, needing to be, super stage lean, maybe even picking up other hobbies or activities, something else that's fun to do because you've been putting so much time and energy that now is, you're letting off the gas a little bit. Now you don't know what to do with yourself. So, coming up with some other opportunities to, socialize or to fill that cup that's feeling a little emptied because, the show is no longer there. These are some of the things besides, I know we always think about, okay, post-show, how am I going to handle my food? How am I going to handle my workouts? What are my goals for my physique? There's still that kind of focus on the bodybuilding, so kind of backing away and stretching a little bit from that, what are the other aspects that are going to really feed my, my happiness and, something maybe I didn't get to do during that time because I was so busy. Now I get to do it.
Right.
So then that helps to like kind of bring the energy and the attitude and the happiness back in.
Well, as always, you've kind of shaped something that I said into the right way of saying it. But I want to be clear. I'm not advocating, hey, you need to shut off all your social media or anything. What really I'm advocating is what Jami talked about, which is just recognizing where you are and honoring that position and doing the things that you need to do in that moment based on your experience and what you're going through. I don't want anybody to isolate themselves from the bodybuilding community. And you may have to temper that just a bit if that is producing a negative outcome for you, meaning it's producing that desire to get back on stage, that desire to prep when you should be focusing on improvement. If it's resulting in that, and again, that kind of talk. It's just the balance of aspect. I think that's really at the core here, is that it's not one or the other. It's not a binary approach. It's a multifactorial approach where you've got to just recognize what you need in that moment.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think we're out of time on this one, but I think we spawned some ideas for talking about other stuff today. But I'll talk to you about that afterwards when we're not on the mic. Okay?
Oh, sounds good.
Yeah, okay. So everybody, thank you for tuning in. Remember to like and subscribe and leave your comments and your feedback. And your reviews. All of that stuff matters to us, and we really appreciate it when you do it. And we will do our best to respond to that stuff and orient shows around your questions or your ideas for what you want us to talk about. Thank you for tuning in. Remember the 3 B's: be safe, be good to yourself, and be good to each other.
Thank you for tuning in to FitBody Lifestyle. We hope today's episode has left you feeling motivated and equipped to tackle your fitness goals, business challenges, and the daily dance of life. Remember to value progress over perfection. Life's tough enough alone. Find the chosen family around you to help you along the way.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FitBodyFusion.